Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of our free online tarot course series brought to you by 1millionnights.com. Now in today's episode we examine the symbolism, possible interpretations, and of course the philosophy behind the Strength card with the numerological value of the number 8. This is one of those tarot cards where the basic interpretation is very straightforward. Strength is basically strength regardless from which perspective we look at it. But of course the philosophy behind it and the nuances of what the strength actually means, now that is multi-dimensional because it can be physical strength, it can be intellectual strength, it can be strength in our virtues, it can be psychological strength as in how much someone can endure. It can also be a different kind of strength which is expressed in leadership, the ability to inspire and mobilize others. It can be basically material strength as in our financial power. But at the same time it can be also a rather shadowy strength if this expression is acceptable, which of course represents, for example, the ability and strength to manipulate others, to transfigure reality in such a way that it suits our needs, as in to lie or to deceive or to use other people. So this can also represent a very narcissistic type of strength. But before we get to the interpretation part and its possible combinations with other cards, first of all we have to understand what this strength means and where it comes from. So first of all we take a look at its numerological aspect, where the number 8 represents in one word mastery. Mastery, experience, studies being used practically, something that you possess control over, know-how over, regardless if that experience is driven by the intellect, where it is basically just structured information, or it is something deeply instinctual, where we might have done something 1,000,000 times and it's already deeply written in our instincts, so we can even perform it blindfolded without expressively paying attention to it. For example, learning how to ride a bike or swimming. In all cases, mastery means that you learned to control something, you have power over something, and that is the material or physical expression of strength. That is strength manifested in the physical world. And this is exactly why the Strength card follows the Chariot card. Now, if you recall in the last episode, the Chariot also involved a certain kind of mastery, because the Chariot is pulled by those two horses or two phoenixes, which represent two inner forces, or it can be an inner force and an outer force, which have to be in balance and work in harmony with each other, so that the main goal or the purpose is one singular, so the chariot is driven into one direction and not pulled apart and destroyed by the horses going in two separate directions. But of course, the charioteer setting on this new journey of his to achieve victory, to conquer higher ground, or to achieve some kind of experience, means an act of initiation. And initiation represents that we are trying to do something relatively new, which we are not very experienced at. So that is why the strength comes as the charioteer navigates on his journey, learns how to drive that chariot and control the horses with great efficiency. And the more he advances on his journey, the more stronger he becomes. And that is exactly why the Strength card is the charioteer's experience, mastery, and ultimately strength manifested. Or another way to look at this is when that charioteer sets out on his new journey, there are two possible destinations. One is the Strength card, where, the charioteer simply embodies his strength and experience, and the other possible destination is the Devil card, where great strength and excess of power can corrupt or can have very negative and dark twists and turns. But of course, the more positive nuance of the Devil card, it doesn't really have to be anything negative or evil in this sense. It can simply mean with great power comes great responsibility, so you cannot have power and strength, so to speak, without doing the work, even if that work is basically just a karmic lesson to learn about responsibility, duties, diligence, and the consequences of just using our powers negligently. Now, the next subject to analyze is the graphic representation of this card, where most tarot decks display it as a young woman, a maiden, a virgin, having tamed a lion or any other big feline. Some tarot decks display it as lion, others as tiger, others as any other big feline like a lynx, for example, while others still use the mythological symbolism of the manticore, a creature composed of different animal parts, where the head is usually that of a lion. And also in most tarot decks, the maiden has an infinity symbol above her head, and if we recall, the magician also has the very same infinity symbol, so that represents mastery, knowing the cycles, and basically knowing the principles according to which the universe functions, as above, so below, as within, so without. So everything is basically a continuation of the cycles and basically a transformation, an act of alchemy, because what we do with our strength is already alchemical in nature. We use it to create, but creation involves turning different elements into something new, even if it's something as simple as cooking. When you cook, you basically hold the knowledge, have the inspiration, the motivation, of course, the hunger, the need, the necessity, and also, let's say, the mastery, even though a lot of listeners might not agree here. But regardless, it is basically an act of creation where the simple fact that you are able to do that, you're able to cook up that meal, is an expression of your strength, of your personal power, of your liberty to do so. But let's go back to the symbolism. So basically the lion, or the big feline, or whatever symbolism the authors use, is the representation of our primordial self, our instincts, our survival mentality, of our flight or fight instincts, and these are a very powerful inner force that all of us possess. And for most human beings, these instincts, which are deeply rooted in our reptilian brain, so to speak, are one of the most powerful driving forces which keep us in existence. And there is no denying that a part of our beings, regardless of how intelligent, sophisticated, educated, or use whatever word you see more fit, but a part of us is still a wild animal. And even though if that part of us has control or is more dominant than any other part of our beings, it usually means a great psychological imbalance, yet still that is the core, the driving force of all of our manifestations. We can simply not achieve, accomplish, or do anything without that wild animal living inside of us, because that is the deep core of our desires and our creational energy. Now, of course, the higher expression of this is the spirit, or how Carl Jung saw the libido as the divine core inside of us, which can take so very many different expressions when we give into this creational impulse. Like the most rudimentary one is naturally childbirth, where, the sexual forces create something new, a new life, a child. But the very same driving force is what, steers an artist or any kind of intellectual creation, just that you don't give into the sexual impulses as in the libido, but you use it in a very elevated, in a very intellectually complex way, or of course for some emotionally complex way, or for others still purely intuitively, but we still use that same energy to create something, even if that something is basically just an illusion. But it is exactly here where the mastery behind the strength card comes into play, because the wild animal, the lion, tiger, or whatever depicted on the tarot card is not aggressive at all. Quite the contrary. Every symbolism and depiction points to the fact that it's very tame, it is very docile, it respects the maiden. The maiden didn't tame it with sheer force, with brutality, with severe conditioning, but rather with being kind to it, feeding it, loving it, or purely intuitively. She just knew all the right gestures to do to obtain the instinctual respect of the wild animal, or in other cases, it was simply the spirit shining through her, and the lion, the wild animal, recognized its creator, so to speak. So of course it is displaying very peaceful and obedient gestures. Now from this perspective, the symbolism of the strength card is very, very suggestive, because this is what inner mastery actually means. That virgin or the maiden is our higher selves. It is our consciousness basically, taming the inner beast, our impulses, our instincts, our survival mentality, and our primordial conditioning basically, with self-love, with experience, with new adventures, with tasting life, and intellectually, emotionally, and naturally spiritually deciphering what life is all about. And whenever we enter into a higher octave of our perceptions, of our life philosophies, about what existence means, about what our own identity means, about what strength and power means, the more the maiden gains ground and the more submissive the wild animal is. But of course this isn't something that is forced or something that is accomplished aggressively, but rather it comes naturally, because with life experience, with mastery, with learning, with knowledge, with, repeating the same gesture, the same routine over and over again, we become masters, which means that our inner being feels more safe and secure because it trusts us, it trusts the self. When our instincts, when our primordial energies actually trust us that we can take care of them and they don't have to be on watch 24/7, they allow themselves to be steered, to be guided, or ultimately to be controlled by our consciousness. They will not strike back against us whenever we require those instincts inside of us to be silent or not to manifest. For example, pride, ego, when someone hurts us, or when we're in a dangerous situation. But of course, the opposite of this is absolutely true, because there are other times in life when our consciousness has to trust that wild animal, our inner strength, And that represents courage, that represents the ability to foresee what our strength can accomplish, which naturally means that we have to know that wild animal inside of us very, very well. We have to know its capacity, but also its limitations when it starts to turn sour and loses its docile nature. But of course, we are talking about those situations when we give it the green flag, when it is perfectly competent to accomplish something. Well, that is where that inner beast represents our courage. It represents the power of our instincts, where even though we might be facing never experienced before situations, the trust in ourselves gives us this power and this foresight that we can go ahead on this new adventure, try something new, or maybe take a risk, take a chance, because even if it doesn't play out the way we expected it, we can still manage, we can still cope with whatever. And ultimately, that is also an expression of strength. Now, from an astrological perspective, the strength card is associated with the sign of Leo, and this comes as no surprise, because on one hand, it is a lion usually depicted on this card. On the other hand, the sign of Leo has so much to do with self-expression, creativity, courage, ambition, trust in the self, and the strength, the power, the supremacy of our heart and heart spaces. Whenever the passion, the desire, the feelings, the inner fire is burning bright inside of us, well, that already empowers every single part of our being. May it be the lion, the wild animal, but also the maiden, the higher self, with energy, with optimism, and with the willingness to be active, pursue our goals, believe in ourselves, believe in whatever we are trying to accomplish, etc. So this is a very strong psychological driving force, because ultimately it all comes down to love. Whatever we love, we feel a passion, we feel a desire towards it, and we are trying to attract it or create it one way or another in our lives so that we can experience it, we can have it, or we can do it. And this is exactly why the maiden and the lion are in perfect alliance and in perfect harmony with each other. Usually, in most circumstances, this card is usually a very positive sign, because all of the things that I mentioned earlier, so I'm not even going to focus that much on its positive expression because it's very, very obvious. So let's say, for example, the strength card just pops up on its own. Well, that is a clear sign either that you're powerful, that you're competent. Continue whatever you are doing. Hold your ambition, hold your passion, align to everything that you love. Be true to your heart, be true to your feelings. You're on the right path. You have accomplished a lot of things and you're doing fine in your life. It can also mean that spiritually you are getting stronger, you're evolving, you are reaching slowly but surely the next stage of your evolution. Have confidence in yourself, have confidence in the truth in your heart, in your abilities, in your self-mastery. So usually it means something really positive. It can either come through as an encouragement to keep on doing what you're doing, or it can come through as a divine confirmation of your value, of your worth, of your inner balance, or your goals, your principles, your passions, your desires. Or in some cases, it can just signify the future, that is where you're heading towards. For example, the strength card with a powerful and positive coins card, like the 10 of coins, for example, whenever you're facing an illness, can signify your imminent recovery, your regeneration, or if you are going on a medical procedure, the operation or whatever is going to be successful. The Strength card with a Swords card, for example, can represent intellectual creativity, self-expression, have faith and courage and self-confidence when you're communicating, or focus on constructive and self-empowering thoughts, because that is how you create your reality. The Strength card with a Positive Cups card, for example, the Three of Cups, can represent a celebration where you express your gratitude for yourself, for the strength that you possess. Or, for example, the Strength with the Eight of Cups or Eight of Cups reverse can represent a divine guidance for you to recall the past where you have been much stronger or much braver or much attribute any positive quality here than you could ever imagine. And maybe you should upgrade your sense of self-worth. Now the Strength combined with a Positive Wands card, for example, the Ace of Wands or Two of Wands, Three of Wands, Nine of Wands, can represent power, opportunities, where you have to be brave, where you have to be maximally confident, because that is the requirement for you to seize and grab those opportunities. It can represent persuasion, it can represent your personal charisma, sexual attraction, new love, all of the good things in life. In some cases, it can also be like a divine encouragement. Strength and Five of Wands, Strength and Seven of Wands, for example, well, it may mean that you have to defend yourself, you have to stand up for your principles, don't let others walk over you. Have confidence in who you are and don't let anyone else take that self-confidence and self-worth away from you. If you're going on a competition or examination or anything like that, a challenge, have faith in yourself and your abilities. So all of this can be encouraging. Now in the following, let's take a look at the more unfavorable or negative interpretations and combinations. And when the Strength card appears in a really bad position, it is rather significant because, the self, the heart, your passions, your driving force is targeted. So you should really pay attention to it. So first of all, the Strength card in reverse position might represent that it's the maiden who has the excessive control, which even though, maybe spiritually, according to Buddhist philosophies, is a really good state of being, but in modern times it may mean passivity, it may mean that you're not really doing anything with your power, that your inner forces are way too docile, they don't really care for the self, or you're sacrificing your personal power or your strength when you really shouldn't sacrifice it, but you should rather have it in a balance. Of course, this doesn't mean that you're not allowed or you shouldn't be compassionate or help others or be there for others or share your power, your strength, your well-being with others. Of course you should, but it should have a balance dominating all of this. A really simple example is whenever you feel really, really tired, well, stop and rest. Or other times when someone asks you a favor, which you know that it's gonna take you a lot of strength to accomplish, well, either you say, I'll try my very best, which means that whenever you get tired or get overwhelmed, you can stop and rest. Or if you find it impossible to complete it alone, well, you tried your best, so there's no negative consequences. Now, when the Strength card is combined with the Sun reversed or Emperor reversed or the Devil or sometimes the Five of Swords, Ace of Wands reversed or Hangman reversed, for example, it can mean that your ego or the wild animal inside of you is more in control than your rational mind or your consciousness without you even realizing this. So, in those times, pay attention to your wounds and what actually motivates you, because it can be, for example, vengeance or a very strong hurt, pain, or trauma, which motivates you to do something or not to do something. It really depends on the circumstances. Or it can also mean that it is your unhealthy desires or obsessions which are actually motivating you. And in any of those circumstances, you have to really go deep within and see if that desire of yours is actually authentic, or maybe someone else or an event in the past may have programmed it inside of you. For example, it may source and stem from envy without you even realizing that it's actually envy. Or for example, if it's regarding matters of the heart, you may think that you love that person or you're madly and deeply in love, when in truth it's just hormones or a very strong and masked sexual desire which is driving you without you really realizing it. So it might be warning you to take a journey deep inside and see what motivates you in its true essence, because you might be living a personal illusion. You might not really be knowing what you're doing really, because you're perceiving the motivational force as something totally else than what it actually is. Now, another unfavorable combination of the Strength card may come with, for example, the 9 of Wands reversed, the 10 of Wands, 9 of Swords, 4 of Swords. It may represent that be very careful how much you immerse into your passions, into your desires, because doing it in great excess will ultimately lead to burnout, and basically your inner fire is going to be consumed and it will leave you empty. It will simply terminate whatever you're trying to do, and not because you're gonna fail or that you don't have the mastery or power to accomplish it, but because you will simply consume your psychological fuel prematurely. It can also represent the necessity to take a break, to rest, to basically lose the intensity through which you're doing things. May that be a physical intensity, may that be psychological or spiritual intensity. It might be a warning, be careful, don't get obsessed or don't get immersed into this in such a deep way that you will just burn yourself out. Now, of course, another combination, the Strength card with, for example, the 5 of Coins or even 5 of Coins reversed, Ace of Coins, may represent that you might be dealing with a hormonal imbalance inside your body, or it can point out to an illness, to physical imbalance within your body, which will have certain physical consequences, like the necessity to visit a doctor or necessity to just rest and take some time out for you to recover physically. In very many cases, the Strength card can simply mean that another card is going to be felt or experienced very, very strongly. Like, for example, Strength and 3 of Swords can represent a very strong and profound heartache. Strength and 5 of Cups, a very powerful and basically maybe life-changing disappointment, disillusioning. Strength and 7 of Cups, a dream, a desire, maybe a fantasy, which is gonna be felt so very strongly that you create it, that you manifest it. Strength card with the Moon reversed, for example, or 9 of Swords, that you're manifesting your fear, or whatever you fear or are a little bit paranoid about is ultimately what you're attracting into your life. So it may be a warning sign to clear your thoughts and your way of thinking or your approach. The Strength card with, for example, the High Priest can actually mean the total opposite. Believe more in whatever you're trying to accomplish or you desire, because you are very close to attracting it into your life. So love it more, believe in it more. Or simply said, just know that it's coming into your life because your desire is that very strong that it has to come one way or another. Another rather negative expression of this can be the Strength card with the High Priestess reversed, or in some cases the Moon reversed, where it may represent that your unconscious mind is more active than any other part of your being, so accept a certain kind of unrest, vivid dreams, or altered state of consciousness which might stress you out and frighten you a little bit. At other times, it can mean the total opposite, when actually your unconscious energies are doing something really positive for you, and this is when the Strength is combined, for example, with the 3 of Cups or 4 of Cups or 10 of Cups. It can mean that divine guidance is present in your life. It is doing something for you. So just trust the process, trust the divine timing. Or for example, the Strength card with the Wheel of Fortune can mean a very lucky opportunity that is falling into your lap imminently, so be prepared for it. Or another expression, something that you strongly desire is simply destined for you, so don't worry about its completion or manifestation, because it's already part of your destiny, so to speak. Well, thank you so much for listening. This concludes today's episode, and please join us next week when we're going to take a look at the interpretation and symbolism behind the Hermit card. Thank you again for listening. Until next time, bye for now.